So this week, I'm welcoming Sharon Strimling. Sharon and I trained together with Jamie Smart. I think it was about a year and a half ago, wasn't it, Sharon?
I'm losing track of time now, but
Maybe it was 2 years. Anyway,
I
you were
think
over
it was 2 or 3, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, well, really? And you were in London for some of the training weeks, and we had some great lunchtimes together, I remember.
I loved being, that seems like a lifetime away, but I loved spending time in London. It was great.
It was great fun. And as anyone listening to this podcast will guess, Sharon is American and she lives in Martha's Vineyard. So this is Sharon Strimling. She's a transformational coach and consultant with 30 years experience in psychological and physical health. Sharon shares from her experience about human consciousness and our innate and always unbroken connection to the brilliance that guides and heals all of nature and humanity. She speaks to our capacity for immediate psychological freedom and how life conspires to thrive through us, no matter our past, current, or future experiences. As someone who herself has moved through rigorous challenges, anxiety, depression, and PTSD, Sharon speaks honestly from an authentic presence, born of her own lifetime of great learning and great joy. Sharon works with executive teams from nonprofits and global companies, with youth with anxiety or depression, artists and creatives, trauma survivors, and anyone with a curious mind and heart. And this past year, she ran free online resilience groups to respond to those struggling with the impacts of the coronavirus. She offers international retreats as well as island retreats from her home island on Martha's Vineyard. So, Sharon, I was wondering if we could start by you telling us how you first came across the principles, when, where, with whom, and so forth.
Oh, storytelling time.
Absolutely.
First, can I just thank you so much for having me on the podcast? I'm delighted to have a conversation with you, and hopefully it will be helpful to people listening, or at least interesting. So how I came across the principles, it was more than half my life ago. And I was in quite an intensive trauma therapy. So I was seeing a therapist 2-3 times a week, sometimes hour-and-a-half sessions. I was very devoted to my growth and to moving through difficulties.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly that really what I wanted was presence. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to hear other people and be with other people and be more alive to life as it was. And it, the paradigm that I was working under at that point was that there was a bunch of garbage to move through to get there,
Yeah.
So I was working really hard at it. I had a wonderful therapist. And it was interesting because I had a very like a PTSD reaction, a very strong reaction in her office one day. And the way I recall it, I ended up behind her couch wanting to hide. And I remember at the end of the session, she took me outside into the woods and had me take my shoes off and just wanted to ground me before I went home.
Right.
And that the next session I showed up at her office, she said, "Sharon, I need to talk to you. I have discovered something that seems to me," I'm not quoting her accurately, it was a long time ago, but maybe 25 years ago, but I've discovered something that it seems to me to be more helpful than what I've been doing. And I'm actually going to stop what I'm doing for a year and study this. And I was so moved by the fact that she was really giving up her profession for a year. And she was saying what I'm doing doesn't seem as helpful as what it could be. So I was just really moved by that and touched by that. And she said the person that I'm learning from, whose name is Annika Hurwitz-Shawn, she's coming to the vineyard this weekend to do a weekend workshop. Would you like to go? And I said, I was young, I was in my early 20s, but I had 25 employees. I had started a healing arts center, and it was the height of our season. It was August, and we were having 50 appointments a day. And I just said, there's no way I can do that. I said, but I can meet with her for an hour if she would do that. So she said she'd check, and I ended up meeting with Annika for an hour. And at the end of the hour, I said, how do I learn this? And Annika said, well, I do 4-day intensives. And I said, how soon can I come? And I went and I put a note on my desk saying, guys, I'm going away. You can handle this. And what I remember from that conversation was it was unlike anything I had heard before. But I sensed something about the way she was speaking, that she was speaking from like a direct knowing, that it was honest and true. And there was something I felt in her that I hadn't felt in many people, you know, a groundedness, a connection to something really solid. And it was so attractive to me. It was like my spidey sense was going, this is something that I think I left a week later and did a 4-day intensive.
Wow.
And my life turned around radically, you know, in those 4 days. I remember I'd been with, I had been, and actually the therapist that I had worked with ended up becoming part of, you know, this teaching on my home island. She really learned deeply and shared from that place after the year. But I remember I was in a relationship at the time, and I'd been sort of hounding my sweetie to go and, you know, get therapy with me, and I'd been very concerned about issues we had. And I remember coming back to him after the 4 days saying, babe, I just want you to know you're fine. I'm fine. We're good. It's all good. And him looking at me like, what happened to you? And I'll describe it, you know, I'll say that I felt like I had been let out of prison.
Oh, yeah.
That's how it felt. But what is really important to point out is I didn't feel like I'd been in prison. Like I felt like I had a good life. I was working on stuff. You know, I wouldn't have said I felt like I was in prison. I wasn't a tortured prisoner in my mind. You know, I was just a person working really hard on my evolution. But there was a sense of incredible liberation at the end of those 4 days, permission that I could show up fully present now.
Yeah.
You know, that it was really okay to live fully, and that there was a system supporting me. There was an intelligence, a genius, a consciousness that I wasn't in charge of micromanaging, that brings healing. And I spent, you know, the next 26, 27 years remembering and forgetting that.
Like we do.
Like we do. But the impact that it had on my life has never been undone, and in fact gets deeper. I learn so much more every day now than, you know, yeah.
That's the amazing thing about it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Once you've got it, you don't lose it.
But I can honestly say I did lose sight of it numerous times.
But it's still there, isn't it? And then you find it again.
Yeah. I mean, all the experience that I had, all the times that I felt like I'd woken up to a different kind of life, a life that's supported, a life that's really, truly brilliant, a life that is unlimited. Every time I had woken up to that, I knew it was real. Even if in my moments of going blind to it, I thought maybe I'd been making it up. I knew it was real. You know, you just know. It's like if you have cloudy glasses on and then you clear them, you don't wonder which one was reality, right? It's once everything's clear, you just know you're standing in truth. You know it. You know it. There's no question. There's no debating. And I think the accumulated moments of those in my life, you know, have created a foundation where, you know, I usually have a pretty clear sense that if I am in a very complicated lost place in my head that there's something amiss, that I'm not standing in truth, that it's not really true. I usually have some sense of that.
So you kind of know when your glasses are dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which doesn't mean that they get clean instantly, or that that I'm in charge of that process, or that I take credit for it. It just isn't a reorientation to what's real and, what's not. It's as simple as, when you wake up from a nightmare and you
Yes.
don't wonder if it was real. Some people like to kind of look and see what elements of it might have been true or hold some truth. I tend not to do that, but you don't think it really happened, right? And
No,
it's
sure.
just like that. We just know our nightmares are nightmares. And at this point, I'm pretty clear that what it feels like to be awake, and what it feels like to be having a rough dream.
Mm. One of the things you said to me when we talked the last time was about, well, I'm going to quote what you said.
Okay.
Mental health looks like the capacity to be real and authentic in the moment, with believed layers of interpretation, judgment, or fear. Could you speak to that for us?
With what interpretation?
But yeah, you believed layers of I guess.
Oh, without believed layers,
Yeah,
of interpretation. And that's a good quote.
it is a good quote.
It always looks different to me. But yeah, that there's a way, especially I went through a really hard time, a much more challenging time than I anticipated a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And it lasted a lot longer than I'm used to. And it was very humbling. It was like, oh yeah, right. I'm, I am, this is a mysterious process, and, there's nothing that can't happen. I can go really down. I can go really down. I can go really dark. And the opposite is true, right? So,
Yeah.
but there's a way that being real and showing up real has been one of the most exciting parts of my journey. To be able to say what, even to people I coach, I didn't want to be alive. To be able to say, I was so angry, all I could do is scream. I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but scream and swear. To be able to show up without layers of what it means about me as a coach, or what it means about me as somebody who has the capacity to share, what it means about me as somebody who has been on this journey for so long, without those layers, just acknowledging that, that thought and consciousness and mind, they come through us all the time. And that there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing that I have to make meaning of about that, because I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my thoughts.
I mean, none of us have thoughts.
We're not our thoughts. And so I guess when I was thinking that, for me at that moment, psychological well-being looks like the ability to show up to somebody and say, I am super, like to my partner, I could show up and say, I am feeling like so insecure and needy right now. And it can just roll off my tongue. It can just roll off my tongue, right? And
Yes.
because I'm super clear that not only am I not that, there's nothing that needs to be changed. And he doesn't need to take that on, because he's really clear. He can just, make me a cup of tea, or say, oh, can I do anything for you? Right? It's just it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
I used to think neediness or insecurity was something that, pushed people away and was really embarrassing. And now I realize it's not the experience of it. It's the meaning that I might make of it, or the burden that I might be implicitly putting on somebody else about it,
Yeah.
or conveying to them based on their level of understanding about their experience. So, yeah, showing up authentically without all those layers of meaning means that I can ride the current of life, be in despair or be in great joy, and it tends to be more of a non-event that moves moves through me, you know.
And you can let it flow through you and it passes. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely moments where I thought this is never going to pass.
Yeah, quite.
It's lasting a really long time, you know. Like I really don't mean to sound, you know, kind of Pollyanna that, oh, you know, I just realize I'm having a thought storm and it just moves right along. Like there's varying degrees of getting caught up. But in general, my experience is that the more I realize that I am not Sharon, I am not my thoughts, I am not my personality, I am not my image, I am not any of those things that I'm so worried about.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not any of that. How could I be? If that changes moment to moment, how could I be? If that changes
Yes.
moment to moment, if I'm brilliant one moment and an absolute mess the next moment, in my mind, how could either of those be true? You know, what's true is something else that shows up when, Sorrel, I'm caring about you, or I'm, you know, I've fallen into awareness of, you know, the beautiful changing colors of the leaves, or even, you know, a moment, I mentioned this the other day, of being swept up in a healthy grief, you know, a loss, the feeling coming through. It's a difference. I'm not identified with it. It's just an experience. And then my identity, you know, who knows what that is, but it's not what I make of it. It's definitely not what I make of it. And there's freedom in that. Means I can not only does Sharon, the personality, show up really differently every day and grow more easily every day, but sometimes the personality Sharon just takes a back seat, right? And I fall into the place I wanted to fall into when I was really young, which is not thinking about me.
To be experiencing life. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of immediately experiencing life.
Yeah.
I don't know yeah, you know, having like just enjoying the clear glasses when they happen. I know when I work with people, sometimes they say, you know, that the colors around them are brighter, you know,
Yes. Yeah,
and
because they're seeing it without those layers of interpretation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel so grateful, you know, I don't count the moments that I'm awake and the moments that I'm present. I don't see the point in doing that anymore. I just don't see it. Like I love the human experience. I love that I can be a mess. And in fact, I feel much more connected to people that I'm on the journey with, that I'm coaching, or that, you know, or that are coaching me. You know, I feel more connected to them the more I am free to have the experience just show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was I going with that? No, I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
This is what happens, isn't it? And actually, it's okay to lose your train of thought. And then,
Oh, I know what I was to say. Like, I don't count the number of moments of presence. I don't. It once occurred to me, I realized that sometimes we count. Like, well, am I grounded and happy half the day? Or is it three quarters? Or is it like a quarter of the day now? Or how many days has it been since I felt really grounded? And, you know, we count like as if that's going to make meaning of like we're a success or not. As far as I see it, I'm going to be learning, hopefully, you know, I was going to say till my last breath, but as far as I can tell, way beyond that,
yeah.
you know.
When we're counting, we're not fully present, are we?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, to me, that would come from some measure of what then makes me feel relaxed that I've been a success, or what makes me, you know, feel that I've been a failure or some other made up judgment. And there is no right number of minutes. Like who would say? Who would say how many moments of presence makes for a grounded present person? Like it's all made up. It's completely bonkers.
Exactly. It's all
You
made
know,
up.
like I have crazy thoughts during the day, you know? And then suddenly the colors are brighter. And I just feel really blessed and grateful that I've learned something where when the colors are brighter and I'm not aware of myself and I'm in service, or I'm just in love with the ocean, I'm so grateful that those moments exist in my life, you know, that that's an experience I get to have. End of story.
Yeah. And you notice it and then it passes, and then you notice it again and then it passes, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fine, isn't it? Like the sun going in and out from behind a cloud or something. Yeah.
I mean, I love all kinds of weather in the sky. Why wouldn't
Yeah,
I
it's
love
good to have a
all kinds
bit
of
of
weather in my
variety, isn't it?
Yeah. It's great. I love it. Yeah. It still whenever everybody says, oh, it's an awful day today, meaning it's raining, I'm like, my rebel has to come up and say, I love rainy days. Don't tell me it's awful. They can think what they want. It's fine. I know.
There's something really lovely about being out in the rain on a warm rain on a summer's day. It's
Oh, I love it.
a lovely experience. And yet we're always so down on the rain, but why? Rain is just rain. I mean, frankly, I wouldn't want to be out in a thunderstorm in the middle of winter, and I kind of value my health, but yeah.
Sure.
And it can be really, to watch it through the window, that's something else altogether.
Well, you know what I love about that is that what you said is I value my health. Like the body mind obviously
Yeah.
has inclinations towards things that keep it safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank God.
Yeah, quite.
Thank God. Right? Like
Otherwise we wouldn't be here, would we? We'd have died out.
But but the idea that you have to dislike something, like you'd have to dislike it to get out of the rain, that's kind of made up.
That's made up. Yeah.
The I'm cold and I want to get warm can come in the absence of a huge amount of judgment. Or judgment can come. That's the other thing I love is that I can have judgment, which I do all the time, and opinions and attitudes, which I do all the time. And that's just what the body mind does. It's like I said, like a non-event. I can catch on to it, and I know that there's always the capacity to see through it, and I don't see through it until I do. There's just, Sarah, it's so nice to just be able to be, kind of easier about this all. That's not something I knew as a young person. I didn't know as a young person how to be easier about life.
I think that's true for a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And for our generation, it was a real problem, but there was so much judgment when we were growing up.
Yeah.
It's good to be clear of that. Can you talk about the distinction you make between limitations and you talk about turning attention to consciousness?
Yeah. How to talk about consciousness. I'm just going to reflect because I had such a lovely conversation about it this morning. Well, the way I see it, everything that I experience, there's this unlimited field of consciousness or energy or life, right?
Yeah.
Like when I had a beagle, he died a few years ago. Oh my God, he was so cute. His name was Little Joe. And he had one of those really square faces. He almost looked like the shape of a lab puppy, where this like, square mouth. And he was so cute. He looked like a puppy forever, but he was grown up. And we would go, and I adopted him when he was about 6 years old from a shelter. And and I took him home to Martha's Vineyard, and I'd walk with him, and he is a hound. And I'd be walking down the streets of my town to the water, noticing the houses and maybe the pavement and how to avoid a pebble in my bare feet, right?
Yeah.
And the architecture and the sky and maybe the sunrise or the sunset. Well, he knew where every bunny was. His nose was to the ground, and his whole experience was coming to him through his scent of smell. And it was all about the bunnies.
Yeah.
So if we came back home and you said, little Joe, Sharon, what was your story of your walk? And then you turned to little Joe and said, what was your story of your walk? He'd probably say, well, there were a bunch of bunnies. They live under this house. I could tell that the last time they ran this way, they were kind of afraid because they smell emotion, I guess. And he'd had a totally different walk. And how does that happen for us? Well, sensory input
Yeah.
gives us like a cartoon of life. The amount that we can smell, the amount that we can hear, the amount that we can see, the background that we have, the conditioning of our minds, the things we've been taught since we were teeny, teeny, tiny, right? All shapes and moves that unlimited data into a caricature, a story, a cartoon that we then think is reality.
Yes. Yeah.
And little Joe and I had very different realities.
You did, didn't you?
But what was common to us was that life was coming to us through our senses, that something unlimited and vast, and who knows what the full image is or the full picture is, was coming to us each
Yeah.
through our body-mind conditioning. I think that's really fascinating. And so I know that I can sense beyond my senses. I know that there's so many times where I pick up the phone to call someone and they're calling me, and that's been studied. I know, that's been studied. There's a really, really old study. It was a double-blind, well-done study on telepathy that proved beyond reasonable doubt that this was a real thing, but it wasn't explained. And then there's hundreds of years of study on near-death experiences and what people experience when the mental activity stops. When mental activity stops, and there's EKGs of people's mental activity that is
Yeah.
the brain is flatlined, but they're having a full-on experience that can be documented afterwards. Well, I don't know what that is, but it does give me a pretty good sense that beyond my brain, consciousness, the awareness of consciousness, it's not limited to my brain. And that when I realize that I've made up a caricature, which I do all the time, and I think I'm right, which I do all the time, then that can drop away. And it's like, I use the metaphor sometimes, I don't walk into my living room to make dinner. I walk into the kitchen. Well, when I want to see truth, I don't walk into my memory. I don't walk into my thought structures. I don't walk into my conditioning. I point myself in the direction of what can I see that I haven't seen. And then I give it time and patience and trust. And I don't even do that. I don't even do that. I don't trust. I don't try to trust. I just turn my attention to a different room, I just, and I see something new. And even, it could be much more ordinary than, the big examples I may used of near-death experiences. And it can be much more simple than that. It can be, having a new idea for a piece of art. Where did that come from? That didn't come from conditioning.
No.
Where did a new idea come from?
Yeah.
Where are these words coming from? I didn't plan them. The thought that just came into my head to share about near-death experiences, where did that come from, right? Things will just appear and we can start to see that more and more. And the more that I turn my attention that way and start to see that that is really what's going on, I'm not making it up and I'm not hoping it's that way. Through my own experience, through my own, what I see in life, that has become something that seems very true.
It's an interesting interplay, isn't it, between the stuff that we do make up and the stuff that's based on our conditioning and so on, and the stuff that comes from the other room.
Yeah.
And we kind of need both, don't we?
Yes.
Because otherwise, how could we communicate with each other if we didn't have those frameworks to communicate from?
Yeah.
So when you and I talk about the principles, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, depending on how we hear that, but yeah, we have like common language. Exactly. We have
Yeah.
like if you were speaking to me in Chinese, I wouldn't, be able to understand. But there would be communication. I love that. I think there still would be communication, but
There would be,
we
because
can
it's
communicate,
language,
but
isn't it?
not. I certainly, if you told me in Chinese how to get to, the shop downtown, that wouldn't work. You know? No, I love that. I'm just so not into, I'm so moved by the limitless. I'm so moved by that room or that out,
Mm,
that mountaintop of perspective. I'm so moved by that, but I'm equally moved by the human experience. I'm equally moved by limitation. I'm equally moved by messiness. I'm equally moved by, swearing at the top of my lungs when that's what I got to do. I'm equally moved by, like I I I just, yeah. I'm equally moved by the fact that I have a sense of deep benevolence in life. I have a sense of the way that we don't always know things that look awful may not be on some level. And I'm equally moved by being an activist and showing up and changing things,
yeah.
right? Like they're both held, at least in my experience, in a way that with real honor.
They're all a part of important parts of being human, aren't they?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we are human beings. We're not dogs and we're not dolphins and all these other creatures that have other experiences and access to other
yeah,
roots, if you like.
yeah,
So,
totally. I get such a kick out of, and I guess it's just a lot of freedom because I used to, and I still get super judgmental of myself and insecure sometimes, but it's less and less. But, you know, I, I, when I think about relationships and I think about how incredible it feels to be able to show up, I'm so lucky right now. I feel like I can show up to the people I love and in my relationship in a way where I really don't have to hide anything.
mm,
I mean, I can even show up as I'm really pissed off and it looks to me like it's your fault. Because understood in our dynamic is I know it's not. But I've got to admit that it looks that way right now. So give me a minute
yes.
to go figure it out. I need to go take care of that. It's not your job. But I am blaming you. I am blaming you. I'm absolutely blaming you right now. But it's not, I know better, but I don't know yet. So let me go find out. And I can move away from that and it can again be a non-event.
So you can let that go really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than trying to pretend, no, I'm not blaming you. No, I'm not. Well, yeah, I am. Not wanting to. Not wanting to, but those are the thoughts. How could you do X? Is the
Yeah.
thought, right? Oh, it's funny.
So you can kind of own your thoughts, can't you? Without getting caught up in them in the way that we would have done in the past. Yeah. So, yeah,
Well, I get caught up. I'm really clear on that. I get caught up.
you get caught up,
I get
but
caught
how
up.
long do you get caught? I mean, I'm thinking about getting caught up for years on end. It's like, yeah, I get caught up for a
Yeah.
while, but I used to be stuck in them permanently.
I don't know. So I don't know how to. There's thoughts there's thoughts I've been caught up in my whole life I haven't seen through yet.
Well, maybe, yeah, maybe there are.
And I was caught up for a long time the past couple of years, much longer than I thought. So it's that thing about measuring. I don't know,
Yeah,
I'm just, I mean, I really used to show up and say, when I have uncomfortable thoughts, they just pass. They don't last long. I just don't say that anymore. I think because it just, I don't even know what I'd be measuring, in this moment. Like there isn't even a future and there isn't even a
so
past. I don't even
yes.
know what I'd be measuring. Like, and I feel like there's an expectation with that. If I used to say, my lows are much more graceful. I don't say that anymore. My lows can be absolutely like not graceful.
You said your lows were graceful.
I mean, yes, sometimes they are, but what's in that? You know, like that's what I wonder. What's in that? What would be in that saying that? You know, like setting an expectation that that's how life should look. Like,
Yes.
life can look like anything. That's what I just feel now. Like life can look like anything, and it's still, you know, as Sid Banks said, you know, it's still a divine dream suspended between time, thought, and matter, you know, something like that, between the boundaries of time, thought, and matter. It's still divine. I don't want to, you know, that's just me. That's how I want to show up. I don't want to show up painting a picture of gracefulness. But I do see that there's a, there's a way that every time that I am blessed, and I don't take credit for this at all, every time that a new level of awareness, or not level, but there's a new drop into reality, and there's a new seeing. Every time there's a new seeing happening, every time that happens, life does feel more gentle overall. You know, that's been my experience. But it's
Yeah.
not a linear path. I'll tell you, I used to, if I could speak just real quick to like,
Cool.
yeah, so before the principles, you know, what would happen is, and actually even in the knowing, but when I've gotten really caught up, what can happen is that I can get spooked by how upset I am, right? So I'm not just having upset, I'm having upset. And what does it mean about, will I be able to show up at work tomorrow? Am I am I a like, credible coach? You know, what kind of, like, you know, a lot of judgment.
Sure.
And so it used to show up with a lot of what we were talking about before, a lot of meaning, right?
Yeah.
So, and so now what'll happen, and so I might have like a terrible like difficult psychological experience, right? And I go down, and then that moment wants to pass, it starts to pass, and I get enough consciousness to realize that I was a mess, which would generally kind of pick me up. But then there's these layers of judgment that go, uh-oh, I was a mess, what do I have to do to fix that, you know, and what do
Yeah.
I need to learn? And for me, I could, you know, the joy of learning is different than the need to learn. The beautiful exploration of consciousness and life is different than the seeking. They're different, and we could talk about that. But so what do I need to learn, and how do I need to fix myself so that I can be okay, and I can think I'm okay, and other people can think I'm okay, right? So instead of like, I've gone down here, and then instead of just naturally popping back up, I'm hanging out here wondering what to do to fix it until the next low happens.
Yes.
Right? And so there's moments I would miss all the time. And this is one of the things that I think is helpful for people to see is we have moments, there's a breath in life that brings us presence all the time. It's like, that's what I talk about with the nature conspiring for us to be present. Like without trying, I'm going to get
Yes.
hungry and be really excited about that mango, right? Or I'm going to notice the dog that ran out front, or somebody's going to need help, and all my worries are going to fall away, and I'm going to be there for them. So there's a way that without trying, like I'd pop up. But as soon as I was up, it would be like, now I did have that rough patch last week. Let me go down and look into it. And that's where I was getting lost, you know, in my therapy.
Yes.
Even though it was wonderful therapy, it was like, let me use my awake moments to go back into memory and work on my issues, right?
Yes.
Now, here's what's different now. I will not say I can't go as low, because I found out I can go as low.
Yeah.
I will not say I don't go as low. But when I come back, when I hit horrible thinking, and then life conspires and I'm back in the present moment,
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy to hang out here. I
Yes.
don't tend to look back and make meaning and work. And so these spaces in between last longer and longer. And if I were measuring, which I don't want to do, but it would make up more of my life. It would make up more of my life, just because I'm not using my present moments the way I used to use it. I know that in presence, I'm awake. Why would I spend all day worrying about what I dreamed last night? I wouldn't. If I had a
And what?
bad dream I'd be so excited for the moment that bad dream hangover passed and I was just back in my day, right? I wouldn't go back into, it doesn't make any sense. So to me, it doesn't make any sense.
It reminds me of Jamie's metaphor about the nightclub. Do you know that one?
Yes, yeah, it's a good one.
It is, isn't it? You're going back to the back of the queue again. And people do that. They do it. I've noticed it a lot recently with clients. That's what they do.
Do you want to share that? Like, do you want to?
Well, I was coaching a guy today who he started going back to work after being off work for a while with some illness. And we're talking about his future. And I have to keep bringing him back to we're talking about the future because he needs to have something to focus his mind on to keep him going back into the back of the queue. Going back to what he's been through in the last 4 years. I was, no, you don't want to go there. That's just dragging you back down again.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, it's like if I'm doing that because I was taught that my freedom, it's so innocent. Like I thought that my capacity to be a good human being depended on my going back and moving. There's one idea that here I am and here's freedom, and in between us is my conditioning and my past. And so I have to, they say, you got to go through to get there. That was now there is a grain of truth. There can be a grain of truth as far as I see it, but it doesn't mean what it sounds like as far as I see it. So to get to freedom, I thought I had to go through the muck. And Sid Banks used to say, you can jump the swamp. And I thought, oh my God, you can jump the swamp? Now that jump for me might look like I remember something from the past and I have a cry about it. But I remember Annika, she was my first teacher, as I told you, 26, I don't know how long ago, many years ago. And then of course I worked with many people after that, but I worked with her for years. And she talked to me about the capacity to have things from the past literally come through for healing, but there's a presence with it. It's not like happening because I am digging around, mucking around, trying to find my way through there. It's different. So I don't tell myself not to. I don't tell myself anything. I'm ruleless. I'm completely lawless. I am a lawless individual, Wild West. I won't listen to rules, and I don't subscribe to not letting the past come up, but I'm not going and searching there for freedom. That's for sure. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And I think you're right about digging back into memories, because memory is not actually a record of the past. It's what we are. It's our current construction of how we remember them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it changes all the time. The same memory just evolves through time, doesn't it? So
It does.
the story that we've made up.
Yes.
We're making up even now, as I think about something that happened last week, I am making up a story about it.
I saw a
Stuff from 40
startling
years ago.
statistic.
Sorry?
What's that?
I said, let alone the stuff from 40 years ago.
Yeah. I read a startling statistic about the accuracy of memory because they were looking at court cases.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was a high 80s inaccurate. I mean, don't quote me on that, but although I am on a video, but it was a remarkable study on memory, how inaccurate it is. And even if you could say that the events were accurate, even if you could say that what you saw was accurate, that still is a construction of mind, thought, and consciousness. So there is no accuracy and it doesn't exist. And it is a creation like little Joe's, accounting of the bunnies in the neighborhood, that just didn't exist for me at all. Except that he howled really loud, so I kind of did get to be included in his story.
So just to stop him from chasing the bunnies.
Oh, yeah, he was on a leash. He was on a leash in the neighborhood, but yeah, he had a lot to say. He had a lot to say about them. He was trying to tell me where they were. Oh.
Do you know, I was thinking maybe before we wind up, if you
Yeah.
a little bit about insight and embodiment, that would be lovely.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this has been a real revelation to me. Again, the lawlessness. I love when I catch on to the fact that I made up rules. or I adopted other people's rules, and it surprises me every time, and I get a chuckle. But yeah, so you know what? When I first, a lot of people I think hear this. When I first got into the principles, I kind of heard you. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you have to do, and kind of throw away your practices. I'd been in holistic healing, so I had a lot of practices for well-being, and um, which I have now reintegrated, and I'm so glad because they're so rich and beautiful. But I had thrown a lot away. You know? um, like I'm here now. I'm here now. Just be alive. I don't need to work on anything. Um, and so I've had many mentors who I love the bits I've gleaned from everyone, but Ken Manning is one of my mentors, and he really spoke to me about doing the work, in a sense, kind of harkening back to what you were talking about with, and what we started talking about with past coming up and conditioning coming up to be healed.
Yeah.
Now, healed is a metaphor. It's a metaphor. We are already, but there's a conditioning healing in the body mind that I do see
Yes.
happen. And he would speak to that. And he kind of did this to me kind of one time, like, you got to do the work. And it wasn't that he said it, it was that I heard it. It was that it made sense to me, that there's a way that if I'd like to experience more of the clear glasses, if I'd like to live in a world where the truth, I get to be more fully alive and or unfiltered by my body mind, programming. Um, I need to actually walk into the living room, not the kitchen, even if it's up 5 flights of stairs, right? I need to do the work. I need to go and hang out there more.
All right.
I'm not saying that's true for anybody else, but I'm saying that in the moment that was shared with me, that was true for me. And so I really started, and I had this intuition decades ago. If I listen to teachers every day, if I listen to people where I really feel truth every day, how much impact that would have on me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing it every day. If I, read beautiful poetry, or if I meditate, or if there's a way that I'm walking into that other room willingly. And there's a way that my body mind conditioning, my cellular experience, my neurology will acclimate to that, and forge new paths. And it made sense to me. It's the same way that going to the gym to work my muscles. I don't have to do that to be spiritually whole. I'm already spiritually whole, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to go to the gym to work my muscles, because my
Yeah.
muscles exist and it might feel really healthy. So there's no reason that I have to turn my back on doing exercises for my mind. I'm not a particularly disciplined person. Well, actually, I made that up. Okay. See, I make things up all the time. I haven't been, but you know, I walk into living room more now. I find that I'm so fueled by seeing the unlimited nature of consciousness that I love watching documentaries about near-death experiences. I had a friend who'd been through one and shared her experience with me.
Oh,
It
right.
gave me so much.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I mean by embodiment. I let myself do the things that make sense to me.
And
To
as you say, that helps you soak right into your cells.
Yeah,
Yeah. And even
yeah,
to the spaces between the cells.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The spaces, I love that. The spaces between cells. It reminds me, because as I'm talking about it, even the body mind conditioning is, it's just everything I say has to be taken with a grain of salt, of course. As we always, people need to listen for what resonates with them as true, not that I'm saying any great truth, but these are all metaphors. Even my idea of body mind conditioning is a construction of mind, thought, and consciousness. It doesn't
Yeah,
really
sure.
listen. If tumors, disappear overnight, then it's a myth that I need to, well, put it this way, I don't need, the way I see it right now, I don't need to do exercises for my body mind conditioning or my mind. However, it makes sense to me to do them. Right now, it resonates. You know, what Ken shared with me resonated with me metaphorically as true, you know, when it's showing up in its own way through me. But yeah, that little caveat, you know, that it's not.
Kind of like, it's kind of like you eat good food for your body and you go to that room, to that living room,
Yeah.
food for your soul, if you like, or for your body, mind, or for both, all three.
And you know, some people, you know, friends of mine and colleagues will eat crappy food with the consciousness of love and blessing,
Mm-hmm.
and are sure that it will be absolutely fine for their bodies. And I have no doubt that's true for them. So, but yeah, for me, um, I I enjoy going to the stuff that, you know, I imagine as I'm eating healthy foods, I have a whole imagination about the way those nutrients are hitting my cells, and I'm a health geek, so it makes me happy. I do it, but I do it from joy. I do it from joy. I get so
Yeah.
much pleasure out of, you know, the view of these vegetables, and you know, yeah. So
The
did
joy is
I kind of answer that? I love what
no,
you said about the space between the cells. I feel like that would be like the whole, this could launch us into a whole new direction, but then we'd be talking for 3 hours.
yeah, exactly. Wow. Book another one, Sharon.
Oh, I'd be delighted. I love having these conversations.
That's been
I
great.
really
I
do.
really enjoyed it. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
me too. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna switch the recording off.
Okay.